The Enchantress Returns, Chapter 11, The Queen and the Frog. It was the final moments before dawn, and the stars were slowly fading away as the sky began to brighten. Froggy and the twins had been traveling through the Dwarf Forest for the majority of the night, covering ground as quickly and quietly as possible. Even after all they had been through together, the twins had never seen Froggy so tense. He constantly watched the path ahead and glanced behind them every few steps to make sure they weren't being followed. "You seem stressed, dude," Connor said, looking up at his green friend. "These times are definitely worthy of concern," Froggy said. "By the way, what's a dude?" Connor shrugged. "It's lingo from our world, nothing important," he said. "Sorry, I forgot where I was for a second." Alex moved closer to Froggy as they walked, keen to have a more serious conversation. "How bad is it really?" she asked. "We've only heard from those animals in the forest and Mother Goose. What's your take on it?" Froggy sighed. "I can't recall a time that's been so troubling," he said. "Even when the evil queen was at large, people went on with their lives. Now that the Enchantress is back, it's as if the world had stopped. Everyone stays indoors, too afraid to come outside until the happily ever after assembly can do something." "And have they done anything?" Connor asked. "Have they figured out any way to stop her?" "I'm afraid not," Froggy said. "They tried enchanting the plants covering the Eastern Kingdom, but it was no use. The magic is too strong. Esmia has grown more powerful than anyone ever thought possible." "Besides covering the Eastern Kingdom in plants, has the Enchantress attacked anything else?" Alex asked. "That's all for now," Froggy said, "which means she's likely to strike again at any moment." "Why is everyone calling it the Eastern Kingdom now?" Connor asked. "Did I miss something? What happened to the Sleeping Kingdom?" "Because the kingdom has finally been restored to its former glory before the Sleeping Curse," Froggy explained. "Queen Sleeping Beauty wanted to celebrate the kingdom's restoration by reclaiming its former title. They were having a huge celebration on the night the Enchantress attacked. Those poor people, they weren't even expecting it." "I wonder if my rubber band trick helped," Connor said to himself. "Why has Esmia covered the kingdom in plants of all things?" Alex asked. "If the happily ever after assembly can't stop her magic anymore, why not curse Sleeping Beauty to die again?" Like everyone else in the fairy tale world, Froggy could only guess. "The symbolism, I'm assuming," Froggy said and rubbed his tired eyes. "During the Sleeping Curse, the entire kingdom was covered in thorn bushes and vines because no one was taking care of the grounds. I'm sure Esmia is taking pleasure in seeing all her hard work go to waste by covering it again. She's getting more use of the hostages than casualties. Making people suffer is crueler than killing them, if you ask me." Alex and Connor were a tiny bit relieved to hear this. If hostages were what the Enchantress was collecting, then maybe their mom's life wasn't in jeopardy. They just hoped she wasn't suffering. "And now the plants are keeping people prisoner there, just like in the Thornbush pit," Alex said to herself, trying to make sense of it all. "Exactly," Froggy said, although no one has been able to make a connection between the two. "What about Queen Sleeping Beauty and King Chase? Are they all right?" Alex asked. "King Chase is stuck in the Eastern Kingdom, as far as anyone knows," Froggy said. "Queen Sleeping Beauty barely made it out. She was attacked while making a run for the border. All of her soldiers were killed, but she survived, thankfully. Soldiers from the Charming Kingdom found her in the forest and brought her back to the Charming Palace." "That's horrible," Alex said with a sigh. "Even though they took our mom, after what we learned about the evil queen, I'm trying to come up with a reason the Enchantress may just be misunderstood too. But it's difficult." Connor grunted. "Not for me," he said. "I don't care what her excuse is. If she hurts Mom in any way, I will make sure it's the last thing she does." The sun started to rise, and the land around them became more visible. In the distance, the twins were taken back to see a familiar wall made of gray brick that stretched across the entire horizon. "Isn't that the wall surrounding the Red Riding Hood Kingdom?" Alex asked. "Oh yeah," Connor said, recognizing it too. "Wait. Why are we headed there? I thought you were taking us back to your place, Froggy." "I am," Froggy reassured. "What happened to your hole in the ground?" Connor asked. "I moved," Froggy said. "I live in the castle now, with Queen red. Froggy blushed a shade of dark green and went silent. Alex and Connor looked at each other with, "Did you just hear that?" written on their faces. Froggy walked ahead of them, crossing through the western gate of the Red Riding Hood Kingdom's famous wall. "Good morning, fellas," Froggy said with a nod to the guards monitoring the gate. "Morning, sir," they said back, bowing slightly as he walked past them. The twins ran through the gate and caught up with Froggy on the other side. "Wait a minute," Connor said with a laugh. "You're living with Red? Are you guys like a couple or something?" Froggy turned even darker green now. "Well, I suppose so," he said, too bashful to look them in the eye. "I wasn't expecting that," Alex said with raised eyebrows. "How the heck did that happen?" Connor asked with a confused grin on his face. "I mean, you're so worldly and she's so not." "Connor, don't be rude," Alex said and nudged him. "No, it's quite all right," Froggy said. "It's very simple how it all happened. Shortly after I was transformed back into a human by your grandmother, and her castle was rebuilt from the fire, Queen Red invited me over for some tea one afternoon. She wanted to thank me again for saving her life during the battle against the evil queen and the big bad wolf pack. It was only supposed to last an hour or so, but we ended up talking all day. Well, she talked and I listened, but we really connected, and since then our friendship has taken a more romantic turn." Their mouths hung wide open, not helping Froggy in the slightest. "And how does she feel about you being in your frog form again?" Alex asked. "It was challenging at first. She was afraid to touch me and wouldn't let me sit on the furniture, but she's come a long way and knows it's for the greater good, even if it does put a pause in our relationship for now," Froggy said. "Red's really an exceptional woman. You just have to get to know her." "Is she still hung up on Jack?" Connor asked. Alex gave him a dirty look. The dark green coloring faded from Froggy's face. "We're working on that," he said. "I don't think anyone can ever stop loving someone entirely. Sometimes love turns to hate, but I'm sure it's possible to ever stop feeling for them. Despite whatever feeling she had left over for Jack, I have no doubts about her affection towards me." Froggy smiled and nodded to himself. Alex and Connor shrugged to each other. Relationships always seemed complicated to them, but they seemed almost impossible to understand under these circumstances. "Does it bother you, though?" Alex asked, knowing how much she cared about someone else in the past. Froggy shook his head confidently. "I figure if Red is willing to accept me, flawed and frog, then I can do the same for her regardless of what baggage she brings," he said. "And in time, the longer Jack and Goldilocks are out of the picture, the better it will be for her. Out of sight, out of mind." "Uh-huh," Connor said with a snort, looking at him through the corner of his eyes. "What happened to Jack and Goldilocks? Has anyone heard from them?" "Very little, actually," Froggy said. "Occasionally they'll be spotted on the outskirts of the kingdom, and a villager will alert the castle guards. But they've kept pretty quiet, and for my and Red's sake, I'm not complaining." The twins were happy to hear Jack and Goldilocks were still together and on the run, relieved that at least something had stayed constant while the rest of the world was in chaos. They walked through the rolling hills of Bo Peep family farms and soon reached the picturesque town in the center of the kingdom. The twins were delighted to see all the dainty cottage homes and brick buildings with pointed hay roofs again. They smiled at seeing Henry Penny Bank, the Shoe Inn, and shops like Patty Cake Bakery and Jake Horner's Pie Shop, all exactly the same as their last visit. One thing was visibly different. The town that had once been full of farmers and shepherds hauling their livestock around was deserted. "It's so empty," Alex said. "Remember how crowded the town was last time?" Connor said. "It was like take your goat to work day or something, if I remember correctly." Froggy let out a sad sigh. "It's a sign of the times, I'm afraid," he said. "It's like this in all the villages and all the kingdoms. No one leaves their home unless it's absolutely necessary." They walked through the park in the center of the town and were pleased to see the Humpty Dumpty and the little boy who cried wolf memorials and Jack and Jill Hill. The twins couldn't help but look at them a little differently, though not considering the information they had learned from Mother Goose. "Whoa!" Connor said, looking across the park. Check out the renovation. At the edge of the park, facing the twins, was Red Riding Hood's castle, her new castle. It stood twice as tall and sat twice as wide as the previous one. It had several towers, each higher than the next, a large dome in the center, and a gigantic clock just above the newly built front steps. Alex and Connor both tilted their heads and squinted at the new castle. There was something rather peculiar about it. Looks familiar, Alex said. Sure does, Connor said. It almost looks like all the other castles and palaces mixed together, doesn't it? Just wait until you see the inside, Froggy said. Red built me my own very library. It's just splendid. Hundreds and hundreds of books, and they're all mine. That's wonderful, Alex said, sharing his enthusiastic smile. Don't worry, Froggy said. I kept all the books you gave me. They have their own special section. He winked at her and Alex grinned. She remembered the books they had bonded over the first time they met. The trio made their way up to the castle front steps, and 2 guards opened the impressively large red doors for them to enter. Good morning, sir, the guard said to Froggy and bowed like the previous set of guards had. Morning, gentlemen, Froggy said. Does every guard know you or something? Connor asked him. Well, I'm not exactly easy to forget, Froggy said. I don't fit in around here looking like this. I'm just glad the villagers stop fainting when they see me. Most of them, at least. They took their first steps into the castle, and the twins gasped. There was a marble floor under their feet, golden pillars to their sides, and an enormous grand staircase in front of them. And to no one's surprise, every wall was covered in a portrait of Queen Red in different glamorized positions. She certainly spared no expense, Connor said, eyeing everything around him. He looked down at the floor and noticed tiny basket-shaped tiles connecting the corners of the marble tiles. It reminds me of Cinderella's ballroom, Alex said, except redified. A short and plump handmaiden was descending the stairs with an empty tea tray. Her cheeks were pink and she was wheezing from the effort. Alex and Connor hid behind Froggy, remembering that their last encounter with her hadn't been a pleasant one. Welcome back, Prince Charlie, the handmaiden called out to Froggy. It was strange for the twins to hear him addressed by his real name. The Queen is in the library. I just served her some breakfast. Thank you. I'm headed there now, he called back to her. Would you like me to bring you some lily pad tea? That would be wonderful, thank you. 3 flies in mine, please. Would you like any tea, Alex Connor? Sure, what the heck, Connor said. It wouldn't be a visit without some lily pad tea. The twins followed Froggy up the stairs, passing the handmaiden, who stopped in her tracks and stared at them, peculiarly not being able to recall exactly where she saw them before, but clearly remembering that it hadn't been a good experience. They reached the top of the stairs, made a right, and traveled down another impeccably decorated hallway, also lined with portraits of Queen Red. They found a pair of golden doors with library, places of books carved into the wall above it. Connor pointed out the carving to his sister. I bet you anything it's so she doesn't forget what's inside, he quietly snickered into her ear. Here we are, Froggy said and pushed open the doors. The twins stepped inside and were awestruck once again. It was the most elegant library they had ever seen, beating even the one in Snow White's palace. Alex almost teared up. Connor nodded with raised eyebrows. It's beautiful, Alex said and placed a hand over her heart. Not bad, Connor said. Shelves stretched to the top of the very high ceiling, with ladders and balconies on various levels. A group of armchairs and sofas was placed in the center of the room, near a large fireplace with a gigantic wolfskin rug that had once been the big, bad wolf himself, spread across the floor in front of it. A beautiful chandelier hung into the center of the room, giving an abundance of light perfect for reading. There were many portraits of Queen Red hung around the library, but an especially large painting was hung over the fireplace of Red reading a book in one of the armchairs. The twins had to do a double take because just below the portrait was the Red Queen Red Riding Hood seated in an armchair reading a book in the identical position as in the portrait. She looked up as soon as she heard the doors open. You're back, Red said when she saw Froggy. She tossed aside the book, which was thin and mostly pictures, and ran to her bow. They collided into a giant embrace. Queen Red Riding Hood was a beautiful young woman with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She was always dressed to the nines in red gowns and a hooded cape. But the twins noticed something different about Red. She wasn't wearing nearly as much makeup or jewelry as she had been before. Perhaps her relationship with Froggy had simplified the young queen's need to impress. Froggy tried kissing her, but Red pulled away. "No kisses, remember," Red said. "I love you to death, darling, but I just find you repulsive in that moment. There's nothing worse than a cold and clammy kiss." "You two!" Red's full attention was diverted to the twins when she spotted them. She stared at them as if Froggy had brought a poisonous snake into the castle. "Red, do you remember Alex and Connor?" Froggy asked. "Remember? How could I forget?" Red said, not looking away from them. "Hi, Red," Alex said politely. "How's it going?" Connor said nicely. "Forgive me. I don't mean to be rude," Red said to the twins. "It's just every time I see you two, I'm heartbroken. Kidnapped or homeless." The twins couldn't argue. She was right. "No worries," Connor said. Red eyed them nervously for a minute before saying anything else. "So what brings you back to this world?" she asked. "Vacation? Visiting your grandmother?" "Not exactly," Alex said. "We were lost in the woods," Connor said. "Surprise, surprise." "Thank goodness we saw Froggy in the forest. Otherwise, who knows where we would have ended up," Alex added. Red glanced back and forth between them and then to Froggy. "So you brought them here?" she said through a forced smile. "Lovely." "They had nowhere else to go," Froggy said. "I couldn't let them wander around alone at times like this." Red looked back at the twins, still anxious. "No, I suppose not," she said. The twins tried to break the awkward sensation. "Your new castle is beautiful," Alex said. "I feel so at home." "At many homes, actually," Connor said. "Was there a theme you were going for?" "Inspiration, mostly," Red said blankly. "Ah," Connor said. "Well, it certainly feels inspired." The handmaiden knocked on the door and entered the library, carrying tea for Froggy and the twins. "Oh, wonderful! Why don't we catch up over some tea?" Red said. Her tone didn't match her enthusiastic words. The handmaiden set the tea tray down on the table by the armchairs and left the room. The twins took a seat across Froggy and Red, and the impromptu tea party began. Froggy held Red's hand lovingly. "Is this all right?" Froggy asked her. "Of course it is. I'm wearing gloves," Red said. It was silent for a couple of moments, with only the sounds of their spoons clanking against their teacups filling the awkward tension in the room. "So, how old are you two now?" Red asked. "You look like you've grown." "We're 13, Connor said. "Oh, that's nice," Red said. "That's how old I was when I was elected queen. Of course, I had my granny to help me." "How is your granny?" Alex said. "Retired, actually," Red said. "She lives at the Shoe Inn now, so I've taken over all responsibilities as queen." "How's queenship treating you?" Connor asked. He sipped his lily pad tea and then spit it out immediately. "It's been difficult," Red said. "There's so much more to being a queen than people realize. It's not all about jewels and fabulous dresses and an abundance of affection. There are lots of decisions to be made every day about peasants and farmers and their needs and whatnot. Luckily, I've had Charlie to help me." "That's nice," Alex said. "Have you passed any new laws or anything worth mentioning recently?" Red looked up at the ceiling, trying to recall what her latest act as queen had been. "I raised taxes," she said happily, but then her smile faded into a frown. "But the people didn't like that at all, so I quickly lowered them. My mistake. Didn't realize they would take it so personally. Apparently, my kingdom has a strong ecology, so there's no need to do that anyways." "A strong economy, dear," Froggy corrected her. "Oh, yes, economy. Forgive me," Red said. "We grow so much food and produce so much wool that our traders are very strong with the other kingdoms. The Red Riding Hood Kingdom is the breadbasket of this world. No pun intended." The twins politely nodded along, but were in shock. Someone like Red was still allowed to lead a kingdom. Froggy decided to save the twins from the conversation and escorted them to the corner of the room. "I want to show you something special," Froggy said, and pointed to a special shelf where all of Alex's books were kept. "Here's where I kept all your books, Alex." "They look very happy there," she said with a smile. Her eyes fell on the titles of the books just below them. "Around the World in 80 Days, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Frankenstein," she discovered with delight. "Froggy! These were all the classics from our world. Where did you get all of them?" Your grandmother, actually, Froggy said. She wanted to thank me for helping you the last time you were here. I must say, the people in your world definitely know how to tell some stories. Alex smiled at the thought, knowing most of the authors of her world had been inspired by the stories of this world. I've read a few myself, Red said, trying to stay relevant in the room. What's the heavy one that I enjoy so much, Charlie? With that funny little language, the complete works of shakery fruit, was it? The complete works of Shakespeare, my dear, Froggy corrected her. Oh, yes, that one, Red said. It was a lovely read. One story is so pleasant, and then the next is so tragic. It took me nearly a year to get through them all. I hope he's still writing in your world. He has a lot of potential, if you ask me. Connor laughed, but made it look like a sneeze. Don't worry, he's around, Connor said. He wondered what Shakespeare would have thought about Red's endorsement. Alex was looking through all the other books in the library. Some of the titles that caught her eye were Royal Romances Through the Ages, History of the Age of Magic, Mammals of the Northern Kingdom, and The Extinction of Dragons. She knew she could easily spend a month in Froggy's library reading everything in it. Look at this one, Froggy said, pulling a book from a high shelf. I think you two would really appreciate it. He handed it to the twins, and they read the title together. It had a dark red cover and illustrations pasted on pages inside. Myths, Legends, and Collecting Spells, Alex read with surprise. Is it about the wishing spell? That and many others, Froggy said. There are all kinds of gathering folklores in there. I had no idea there were so many, but who knows which ones are real and which ones are not. They flipped through the pages, skimming past chapters about various legends of the fairy tale world. A few caught their eye as they searched. The sorcerer's sword was a weapon believed to have gone missing during the Dragon Age, and allegedly could cut through anything. The Wand of Wonderment was a magic wand built from the most treasured items of the most hated people in the world, and made whoever possessed it invincible. The Vanity Crown was made of the most valuable jewels in all the kingdoms, and was rumored to transform whoever wore it into the most attractive person alive. They came across a section devoted to the wishing spell, and Alex read out loud as Connor followed. The wishing spell is a legendary spell, mostly told to children, to inspire a work ethic that grants one wish to whoever collects a series of special objects. Several people have died trying to test the theory of the wishing spell, but due to all that is unknown about the spell, it is highly unlikely that the spell exists, and it is thought to be only a childish story. If I had a nickel for every time we proved a childish story was true, Connor said under his breath. There was a knock on the door, and the handmaiden poked her head inside the library. A message from the Charming Kingdom has just arrived for you, Your Majesty, she said. Oh? Red asked. Let's see it. The handmaiden walked in and handed Red the letter. It was a white envelope that had a gold glass slipper wax seal on the back. I wonder what this is about, Red said as she opened it. I doubt Chance and Cinderella are throwing a ball at the time like this. She read the letter, and her eyes grew wide. She placed a hand over her mouth. Oh, my, she said. What is it, my dear? Froggy asked. Pinocchio Prison has been attacked by the Enchantress, Red said, looking up from the envelope. The Charmings are hosting a meeting for the Happily Ever After Assembly. Red handed him the envelope, and Froggy read with the twins looking over his shoulder. To Her Majesty Queen Red Riding Hood, we regretfully inform you that late yesterday evening, the Enchantress attacked Pinocchio Prison, consuming it with her enchanted plants. There is still no word of any survivors. Your presence is requested tomorrow evening at the Charming Palace, where a meeting will be held with all heads of state and the Happily Ever After Assembly to discuss the current situation. Your attendance will be expected unless other word is received. Sincerely, their Royal Majesties, King Chance and Queen Cinderella. Red sighed and nodded her head. I'll need to leave at once, Red told the handmaiden. Please prepare a carriage for us to travel in, and another carriage for my overnight luggage. The handmaiden nodded and hurried out of the library with her instructions. Alex and Connor looked at each other, knowing they were thinking the same thing. We have to go to this meeting, Froggy, Alex said. We have to know what's going on. And why is that? Red asked. The Enchantress has our mother, Connor said. We need to figure out a way to save her. Well, what does your grandmother say? Red asked. Alex and Connor looked at each other cautiously, wanting to break the news to Red gently. She doesn't know we're here, Connor said. She doesn't want us to know anything, Alex said. Red cocked her head sideways and glared at Froggy. Hold on a second, she said. Are you telling me the fairy godmother's runaway grandchildren are hiding in my castle? Froggy turned a shade of light green. Like I said, I couldn't leave them wandering alone in the forest, he said with an apologetic laugh. Red turned the same color as her clothing. Do you know how much trouble we could get into when the fairy council finds out they are here? Red yelled. It doesn't matter because no one's going to tell her where we are, Connor said sternly. Excuse me, but who died and elected you my successor? Red said. I should have you both thrown out of here. Connor raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms. But you won't, he said snidely, because you know what's worse than involuntarily housing the fairy godmother's runaway grandchildren? Voluntarily kicking out the fairy godmother's runaway grandchildren. Red made a couple high-pitched grunts as she looked between the twins and Froggy. She hated being compromised in her own home. How are you going to get inside that meeting? Froggy asked the twins. It's for the heads of state only. It's very exclusive. Besides, your grandmother is going to be there. How would you hide from her? Alex sighed, thinking of how they were going to pull it off. We'll need to hide in something, she said. Something large enough to fit both of us inside it, but not suspicious looking. Connor's eyes lit up and he looked around the room, searching for something he had seen when they came in. He walked across the room and pulled a portrait of Red off of the wall and brought it to her. Hey, Red, Connor said. Do you still have this dress? Alex and Froggy walked to Red's chair to take a look at what he was referring to. In the portrait, Red was wearing an enormous ball gown that protruded from her waist and flowed to the floor. I believe so, actually, Red said. It was one of the only dresses that was saved in the fire. Wait a second. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you? Connor looked up at Froggy and his sister with a giant smirk on his face. It didn't take them long to figure out what he was planning. And once they did, matching grins appeared on their faces. It's perfect, Alex said. I have to admit, it's very clever, Froggy said. Red was appalled. Have you all gone mad? Red said. You expect me to waltz into a meeting with the happily ever after assembly with two brats under my dress? Absolutely not. I will not have any part in this whatsoever. Alex and Connor looked at each other and their grins disappeared. Each gestured for the other to do or say something to convince her. Red, Alex said, leaning down by her side, our mom is in danger. We need to know what's going on so we can figure out a way to save her. Connor leaned down on Red's other side, taking his sister's lead. She's all we have, Red, Connor said. If anything happens to her, we'll be orphans. Red was accosted by their pleading faces. She knew she couldn't say no to that. Even she wasn't that selfish. All right, Red said. I'll help you out this one time, but after this, I'm done. Large smiles appeared on the twins' face. Red rubbed the sides of her head, wondering how on earth she had gotten involved so easily. It had been such a quiet day until the twins showed up. Thanks, Red, Alex said. You won't regret it, Connor added. Red sank into her chair. Can I get that in writing? She asked.